Valcora Deneith was seen as the perfect wife, elegant, composed, and devoted. Roanell Deneith was admired for his quiet brilliance and success, but behind the walls of their luxurious home, something unthinkable was unfolding. When Roanell vanished without a trace, all eyes turned to his grieving widow. What no one knew, not even Valcora, was that Roanell had left behind a silent witness, a hidden network of surveillance cameras that recorded everything. And when the footage surfaced, it exposed a nightmare no one was prepared to see. Valcora Deneith appeared to have it all. In the quiet, tree-lined community of Elm Vale, where neighbors prided themselves on appearance and order, she stood out as someone truly exceptional. Tall, graceful, and always impeccably dressed, she had a presence that turned heads wherever she went. Her life looked like something out of a glossy magazine. A luxurious home set back from the main road, 2 imported cars parked in the curved driveway, and a garden that bloomed year-round with rare flowers. To the outside world, Valcora and her husband Roanell were the perfect couple, successful, charming, and deeply in love. But perfection is often the best disguise. Roanell Deneith, a quiet and methodical man, had built his wealth through years of software development. His work in cybersecurity had earned him international clients, and his inventions were now used in several government systems. But unlike his wife, he never sought the limelight. He was reserved, always a bit withdrawn in public settings. Most who met him assumed he was simply shy, happy to let his wife shine. But close acquaintances noticed a subtle shift in Roanell over the past year. He had stopped attending public events. His name was missing from business meetings. And even when he was seen, he looked thinner, tired, and distracted. Valcora explained away his absence to anyone who asked. She said he was working on a big project or dealing with stress or even just taking a break from public life. Her tone never faltered. Her smile never wavered. No one questioned her too much. Why would they? People liked Valcora. She donated generously to local charities, organized community events, and was always the first to offer help when someone needed it. But behind her charm was something much colder, something meticulous, something dangerous. Inside the walls of the Deneith mansion, the atmosphere was far from peaceful. Roanell's private office, once filled with computer monitors and blueprints, had become quiet. The lock on the door was changed, and even household staff were kept away from that part of the house. The kitchen, once a space where the couple often entertained guests, was now always spotless and unused. Meals were rarely prepared. Rooms that used to echo with music and laughter now sat in eerie silence. The home had transformed from a place of warmth to a place of secrets. What no one could see, what even Valcora herself didn't know, was that Roanell had been slowly turning his knowledge of surveillance into something personal. Suspicious of changes in their finances, his declining health, and Valcora's strange behavior, he had begun installing covert cameras throughout the house. Not the kind visible to the eye. These were advanced, almost invisible to anyone who wasn't looking closely, devices hidden behind air vents, light switches, and in the corners of ceilings. Each one was connected to a secure external server unreachable from the home network. Roanell had built a private archive, a diary of images and videos that silently recorded everything. At first, the footage showed nothing unusual. Valcora walking around the house, organizing bills, talking on the phone. But gradually things started to change. She was seen disposing of documents late at night. She began locking the basement door, keeping the key on her at all times. She would walk around the house at odd hours, whispering to herself, often looking over her shoulder. Roanell continued to monitor the footage silently, saving specific clips, even labeling them with cryptic notes. He was preparing for something, though he didn't yet know exactly what. Valcora, unaware that her every move was being watched, felt more confident than ever. To her, Roanell had become a burden. Quiet, reclusive, and standing in the way of her future plans. With most of wealth still in his name and her growing need for control, the perfect image she maintained in public was beginning to crack in private. But what she failed to see was that while she was trying to erase Roanell from her life, he was leaving behind a trail, a silent collection of truths hidden in plain sight, a digital witness waiting for the moment it would be needed most. On a chilly October morning, the town of Elvale awoke to a startling piece of news. Roanell Deneith was missing. The announcement came quietly at first, a small note posted online by the local sheriff's department stating that a well-known resident had not been seen for over 24 hours. But within hours, it spread rapidly. Newspapers picked up the story, social media buzzed with speculation, and neighbors gathered in hushed groups, their voices laced with concern and curiosity. After all, people like Roanell didn't just disappear. He was calculated, predictable, and deeply rooted in routine. Valcora Deneith stepped into the spotlight without hesitation. Tearful but composed, she told the media that her husband had left the house the night before after an argument. According to her, he'd been under immense pressure from work and hadn't been himself for weeks. She said he needed space, and she never imagined he wouldn't return. She claimed to be heartbroken, confused, and desperate for answers. Cameras caught her weeping, clutching a framed photo of Roanell, asking anyone with information to come forward. Search parties were organized, volunteers scoured the wooded trails and back roads near the Deneith estate. Drones were deployed over the lake bordering the town. For days, the community searched every inch of Elvale. And yet there was no trace of Roanell, no phone calls, no bank activity. His car, a sleek black sedan, was missing. His phone was turned off. It was as if he had simply evaporated. Despite her very public grief, some people began to notice strange inconsistencies. Detectives, trained to observe what others overlook, noted that Valcora was calm, too calm. During her interviews, she never slipped, never contradicted herself, never offered more than what was asked. Her grief appeared rehearsed, her body language controlled. When asked to provide access to Roanell's personal devices or workspaces, she hesitated. She claimed not to know his passwords, said she never involved herself in his business affairs. But investigators knew that Roanell wasn't the kind of man to leave his affair so loosely guarded, especially not with someone he'd suspected of betrayal. Then came the financial red flags. Just days after Roanell's disappearance, Valcora contacted their legal advisor requesting urgent changes to their shared accounts. She began the process of moving large sums of money, liquidating assets, and even contacting real estate agents about listing the house. When questioned, she explained that she needed to prepare for the worst, but to investigators, it seemed more like someone who already knew the worst had happened. 1 week after Roanell vanished, his car was found. It had been abandoned at the edge of a rugged cliff that dropped sharply into a reservoir. The doors were locked and the keys were still inside. The police launched a dive operation, believing they might find a body below. But after 2 full days of underwater searching, nothing turned up. No remains, no belongings, just silence. The discovery pushed public opinion toward the theory of suicide. It made sense to many. A man under pressure, retreating into isolation, possibly suffering from mental health issues, taking one final drive and deciding to end his life. Valcora leaned into that narrative, hosting a well-publicized memorial service attended by dozens. She wore black lace, delivered a heartfelt tribute, and thanked everyone for their support. She even promised to start a foundation in Roanell's name, something she claimed would carry on his legacy. But behind the scenes, a different kind of investigation was underway. Detectives were digging deeper, speaking with former business partners, financial auditors, and even housekeepers. And just when the trail seemed to grow cold, something unexpected arrived. An envelope delivered to the station anonymously, containing a single black flash drive. There was no return address, no fingerprints, and no note, just the device. Inside, it was something no one could have anticipated: surveillance footage. Hours and hours of it. The files were labeled with dates and room names. Library, basement, hall, garage, entry, and what it showed wasn't just someone walking around a house. It told a story. One the world hadn't heard yet, one that would shatter the illusion of Valcora Deneith forever. When detectives inserted the anonymous flash drive into their computer, they had no idea what they were about to uncover. The files were meticulously organized by room and date, spanning the last 4 months. Each video bore labels like master bedroom, 2:13 a.m., basement, late entry. At first glance, the footage looked like typical household surveillance, quiet rooms, occasional movement, nothing out of the ordinary. But as they clicked through the days, a disturbing pattern emerged. The house was watching. Every corner, every hallway, and every room had been quietly observing its occupants. And what it captured was not the life of a grieving wife. It was the descent of someone hiding a monstrous secret. One of the earliest videos to raise alarm was a short clip from the kitchen. It showed Valcora pouring something from a dark glass bottle into a mug, glancing over her shoulder the entire time. Later footage revealed Roanell drinking from the same cup, moments before he appeared to lose his balance and grip the counter for support. These clips were time-stamped just 2 weeks before he disappeared. In another video taken from a hidden angle in the hallway, Valcora was seen dragging a suitcase at 3:47. She paused near the basement stairs, opened the door slowly, and disappeared from view. She didn't reappear until over 40 minutes later, this time without the suitcase. Her hair was disheveled and her face looked cold and expressionless. The most chilling footage came from the camera labeled basement hall. It was positioned near a locked door, a room Roanell had apparently forbidden anyone from entering. In the days leading up to his disappearance, the camera caught snippets of unsettling behavior, Roanell walking with visible weakness, stumbling as he reached for the door frame, Valcora following behind him minutes later, holding something in her hand wrapped in cloth. One evening, Roanell was seen being helped down the stairs by Valcora. His steps were slow, unsteady, as though he was disoriented or drugged. Once inside the basement, they disappeared from the camera's range. He was never seen again. But Valcora returned 20 minutes later, alone. Detectives watched hours of footage, each clip more damning than the last. They saw Valcora burning clothing in the outdoor fireplace at night. They saw her scrubbing the floor near the basement with bleach, and they noticed she always wore gloves when handling anything in that area. Her behavior was methodical and calculated, never frantic or impulsive. Then came the final piece of the puzzle, a video showing Valcora in the garage, kneeling beside a large plastic container, her face lit only by a small flashlight. She opened the container briefly before sealing it shut with industrial tape. This happened the same night Roanell's car was found abandoned by the cliff. It appeared she had staged the scene to make it look like he had taken his own life, disposing of key evidence before alerting authorities. Forensic analysts extracted the metadata from the flash drive and confirmed its authenticity. The timestamps matched Roanell's final days. The footage had not been tampered with. Everything Valcora had done was captured by the very home she lived in, and she had no idea. The most pressing question was how these recordings had reached law enforcement. Upon deeper investigation, they discovered Roanell had created an encrypted backup system that automatically transferred copies of the surveillance footage to an external server. That server was linked to a storage unit he had rented under a pseudonym. His cousin, Lenore Fael, a retired systems analyst, had been given access to it in the event of an emergency. When Lenore didn't hear from Roanell for several weeks, he checked the drive, and what he found horrified. Without hesitation, he compiled the most damning clips and anonymously handed them over to the police. The case had now taken a dramatic turn. Valcora's carefully constructed narrative was unraveling, not by eyewitness testimony or confessions, but by technology. Silent, cold, and indisputable, the home she thought was hers alone had been keeping score, recording the truth in shadows, and now it was ready to speak. Valcora Deneith was arrested 2 days after the police confirmed the authenticity of the footage. The charges were severe: first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and obstruction of justice. News of her arrest spread like wildfire. Elville, once charmed by her elegance and poise, watched in disbelief as she was taken from her mansion in handcuffs. Cameras captured her blank expression, her eyes hidden behind dark glasses, her signature grace replaced by cold silence. For a woman who had carefully curated every detail of her life, the unraveling was sudden and absolute. The investigation that followed turned the spotlight on every room in the Deneith estate. Forensic teams swept through the house with precision, guided by the footage Roanell had left behind. The basement, once sealed and avoided, became the center of their operation. What they found confirmed their worst fears. Beneath the floorboards, inside a concealed chamber no one had previously accessed, they uncovered a sealed plastic container, just like the one from the garage footage. Inside were remains, confirmed through dental records to be Roanell Deneith. His body had been carefully wrapped, preserved with chemicals, and hidden beneath layers of concrete and insulation. It was a horrifying discovery. Despite the time that had passed, the evidence of how he had died was clear. Toxicology tests confirmed the presence of a slow-acting poison. It had been administered in small doses over several weeks, enough to weaken him, confuse him, and eventually kill him. The truth painted a calculated timeline. Valcora had begun poisoning Roanell quietly, while continuing to maintain their public image. As his health declined, she controlled who had access to him, refused hospital visits, and isolated him under the guise of privacy. In his final days, she accelerated the dosage. Then, once he was dead, she moved his body, staged the disappearance, and crafted a perfect lie. What she hadn't anticipated was that every step had been recorded. The trial became a national sensation. Prosecutors presented the case as a chilling example of modern betrayal, where appearances concealed evil and digital evidence spoke louder than any witness. The surveillance footage was played in court, each clip displayed to a stunned audience. The jury watched in silence as Valcora's late-night movements, the poisoning, the body disposal, and her post-murder actions were laid out in damning detail. Every frame served as a brick in the wall that would ultimately close in around her. For her defense, Valcora's legal team attempted to argue that the videos were taken without consent, that they violated her privacy, and that they could not definitively prove murder. But it was a weak defense. The court ruled that the recordings were made by the victim inside his own home, and the contents of those files were not speculative. They were visual facts. Furthermore, financial records revealed Valcora had recently changed her will, moving assets under her sole name. Emails and deleted text messages hinted at an affair with a real estate investor in a nearby city. Her motive was as strong as the evidence itself: wealth, freedom, and reinvention. Even without a confession, her guilt was undeniable. The jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty on all counts. The judge, referencing the cold and calculated nature of her crime, handed down a life sentence without the possibility of parole.
The Deneith estate was seized and auctioned. The funds were allocated to a digital ethics and surveillance foundation created in Roanell's name. Leonard Fail, still shaken by the discovery, spoke publicly only once. In his statement, he said Roanell had always been careful, always prepared. And in the end, it was his quiet foresight, not the justice system or the community, that made sure the truth surfaced. Valcora was transferred to a high-security prison, where the carefully constructed life she once led was reduced to a number and a cell. Her world of appearances, control, and secrets had collapsed, and she was left to face a future she couldn't manipulate, watched now not by hidden cameras,